You're welcome to my YouTube channel. Um, Today we are having a deep dive into machine learning scheduling of pipelines. So, as a machine learning engineer or data scientist, you can perform your exploratory data analysis, or you can actually train a model which you have spent good time trying to optimize this model and make them to perform well. Now, when new data come, you don't want to come back to physically start training this model. Again, in production systems, you may have deployed this model to a client, and as new data come in, the client will not be calling you every time to come and retrain this model. Let's assume they have a click stream, they have got new data from their customers. They want to use this new data to retrain this model and retrain these pipelines. Um, you wouldn't, it would be higher cost for the customer to always call you to input this data and retrain this model. So what we have on screen here is from Azure Machine Learning. We have a model, which is we call a pipeline. A pipeline starts from the data input to all kinds of pre-processing on the data, to the training of the model, the scoring of the model, and the evaluation of the model. Now, when you have done this, as we have done on this screen, you can see that all of them are showing green, which means I've run this pipeline and it is working properly well. So the goal for today is not on how to design this pipeline. The takeaway today is on how to make this pipeline to repeat itself after a given number of time or when new data is provided. So this is our data set, which is the adult census income binary data. We are not going into explaining this model. I said we are going straight into trying to make sure that this pipeline can run after a given time or when new data is provided. And that is called scheduling of a pipeline. When you schedule or you schedule a pipeline, it means that you have set a criteria when it is going to run. Now, my commitment in my channel is to be able to carry people who know how to code as well as people who don't know how to code and bring everybody into the knowledge of machine learning. So in Machine Learning Designer, we don't use code, but I'm also going to show how we can schedule this pipeline to run by scheduling it on this Azure Studio, and we can also try the same thing using SDK. SDK is where you have to program. So how do I schedule this pipeline? Before, how do you know the pipelines that you have? So in your studio, we go to the pipeline in your Azure Machine Learning Studio. When you click here, you will be able to see the different pipelines that you have run. So these are the different pipeline. Some of them could be just data processing. Some of them could actually be model you have trained. So in our case, we have a trained model. And what the trained model does is that it tries to classify somebody who has actually, based on certain properties, whether the person is able to earn 50K and above. So let's just briefly, if we look at the model evaluation, you click on this, you go to, sorry, evaluate. Where's my model output? Okay, so I'll have to uh, start an instance. As we know, you need to run whenever you want to do anything in Azure, you need to start an instance. So I go back to my compute. So if I go to compute, I have an instance. So I click on this and click on start. So my compute instance will be starting. So without it, I won't be able to run and show you the output of the model before deploying it. However, before this finishes, I would like to introduce us a bit to the coding aspect. So in machine learning, you can, especially in Microsoft Azure, you can do your model training and the pipeline deployment either using the the Azure's Machine Learning Studio, or you need to write a program using a notebook in order to do the deployment. For you to be able to schedule a pipeline to run after a given time, you will need to make sure that you have actually created a pipeline. And an important aspect of this pipeline SDK is the schedulers. So you need to be able to have schedulers. So you can see these two classes, which you have to import from the pipeline.core. So you have the class called pipeline and you have the class called published pipeline. So the pipeline I've shown you in the studio could be published or not, but if you want to use it in the pipeline studio, you have to publish it. And I will be able to show you in the studio on how to publish it. So you can see that our instance is now running. So as our instance is running, I have to go back to my pipelines. You double click. So the example we'll be using today will be based on this experiment scheduler of population class. So if I click on it, and come down here, so this is supposed to show me the results. So I just wanted to be able to show us some of the result summaries of this model. So as I mentioned, how the model was trained and how the pipeline was built is not the goal of this session. The goal is on how to schedule this pipeline to repeat. But I just wanted to be able to show us some results. Compute duration took 58.87 seconds to train this model. I'm trying to find, yes, you go to output. So if we go to output, and you now say show data, you click on this. So we'll be able to see the plots for the model that we have trained. So we can see the ROC curve, you can see the precision recall, and all the other parameters. We can see the confusion matrix. Of course, the performance of this model yet is not great, but as I said, optimizing the model is not the goal. So we have a model with accuracy of 84%, precision of 77. We can see that the recall is very, very poor. And then the F1 score is also low. So, but these are not the goal. So having seen the performance of this model, if we want it to repeat, so let's assume that the problem of this model is that the data we have collected is not good enough. We would want the model to repeat either after a given number of time, maybe every week, or when new data are provided. So how do you do that? As you already have this pipeline showing here, what we do is that we come here to this schedule. So you have this schedule, you click on it, you click on create new schedule. Then you click on it. You have to get a name. So you have to choose a name for this schedule. You say income okay, let's say income predict runs every week to retrain model. So you can see where we have recurrence. So we have this place we call recurrence. So you can have, so because this is going to be time-based, you may want to specify your exact time zone, the time zone where you want this model to run, because the time zone that you're in will determine what the system will use to run. So you have to determine your particular time zone and use that to run this model. So let's leave it as this universal time. So when we click on recurrence, an important thing is repeat every, that is the repeat frequency. So when you choose this repeat frequency, let's assume we said every 1 week. So you see, you can have minute or hour or day or week or month. This will be very important. If you are kind of, say you are running a model that takes everyday input and the prediction it makes is dependent on last day's input, or you know that they might impact the outcome of the model, that means that you have to you have to say like maybe every day. So, but this one, I have used the example of every week. So when you choose every week, you can see that by default, you have Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So we have once every week. So you have to choose the particular day. It runs on a Saturday. So you remove these other ones. So you see it runs on Saturday every 6 p.m. every Saturday by 6 p.m. Starting on the 25th of February, or you can choose a different date you want it to start, as the case may be. So normally in Azure, you may want to tag this schedule that you're creating. So you say group, AI group, okay? So you now say review. So let us just look at this again. For you to be able to schedule a pipeline that you have, that you want to run at a given time, you have to first of all build the pipeline. And when you build the pipeline, you run the pipeline to make sure that they are running perfectly well with the data you have. Then you have to click on schedule and you have to get the name of the schedule, any name you want that is acceptable. And then you have some description because you want someone to be able to understand what he's doing. You choose the time zone when you want this to happen. So we say that there are different methods. You can either use an expression or you say the frequency of recurrence. We are focusing on recurrence. I've chosen for mine to run every week on Saturday by 6 p.m. and that it should be starting on the 25th of February to run. And if you want, optionally, you kind of give a tag. And also you can choose an end date if you want it to have an end date. If not, it will run indefinitely. So you can choose an end date. So this automatically says this will run for 1 year. So for your clients, you can actually set this whenever they provide data every week at this particular point in time, this model runs automatically and it will continue doing so for the next 1 year. So it may not require the attention of a data scientist or machine learning engineer. Then you review and create. So you look at this, okay, review and create. So it says the schedule interpret predict was created successfully. So this has been created successfully. Now, we will not be waiting for 1 week for me to show you the example, but I will show you the examples that that have run in the past, the ones that I configured to run every 15 minutes. And so I will use that to show you examples. So when you go to pipelines, you can see the pipelines that have run in my own studio. And how do you know the ones that I have scheduled? So you can see that these three said based on time, based on time, based on time. So I created this pipeline to run every 15 minutes. So you can see this one run at 9:39, the other one at 9:54, and the other one at 10:09. So if you see the difference between the running of these pipelines is every 15 minutes. So if I have the one I've created to run for 1 year, every week will be running every week. So you are not going to see them here until they run. So you can see that the one we have just created is not appearing here. The name of the ones that we have created is not appearing here. So it's only when they run that you will be able to see them among the pipelines that have actually run. Okay. So, having said this, as a programmer, you may want to repeat this process through a programming process. So, I hope we have understood this. And if you have not, please put your comment, and then I will be able to answer that. And in the comment section, you can provide your queries, which I'll be able to reply you on this channel and different channels where I attend to. So moving to the SDK. SDK is software development kit. So in machine learning practice, you expected to understand how to write program and to achieve what we have done in this interface using computer programming. I've actually introduced that before, but now let us run through this. Let us run through the same way that we want to schedule this pipeline through SDK. So by default, I'm using Python. So the first thing, if you start a notebook, so you can see where to start notebook actually on the left. So when you click on notebook, you will now be able to create a notebook where you can start executing your Python commands. So important one is to install the Azure Machine Learning pipeline, which you do with pip install, and then it runs, producing all these results that you're seeing here. And after it executes successfully, that is when you start writing the code to execute this pipeline. So we say trigger pipeline with Azure Machine Learning SDK. So what we have done in the studio, we want to repeat them using code. So you have to import the Azure Machine Learning.core. You import the workspace, and from the pip install, you'll be able to import pipeline and then published pipeline. Of course, every pipeline runs through an experiment. So that is why you have to import experiment class. Now you have to connect to Studio. Of course, for you to do any of the thing I'm saying here, you must have an Azure account, be it a free one. We will do that in a different lecture. But we assume that the people listening to us here are not beginners. They are more of people who knows about machine learning in some sense. So you have to, from configuration, you connect to your workspace in Azure. Now, what we're doing here is to, first of all, list the experiments that are existing in Azure, because we want to schedule a pipeline that is already existing and possibly has actually been executed. So that is what we're doing here. Now, for us to do this through this programming, you need to also have published that pipeline. So if I run this block of code, let's see the output it gives us. So when I run it, I see this. So none of the pipeline I've created, the one I want to schedule is not showing here. So what do? I need to go back and publish that pipeline. Yeah. I need to be able to publish the pipeline. So when I click on this, so I click on publish. So I've created one before. You can actually deploy the both of them to the same endpoint. So you have to create a pipeline endpoint. So let me choose this again. And then you can decide to accept the published pipeline name. Yeah, you can set it as default pipeline for this endpoint, or if you want the previous one I have established to be the default, then you leave it at that. But it's up to you to choose what you do with it. Will I be able? Okay, let me copy this name. So when I come here, I will now click on publish. So I have published this pipeline. I said that you need to publish it before you can use it with the SDK. So having done this publication, let me run this code again and see what I get. So you can see that I now have two pipelines here. So you can see this. We did not see this before. We now have the experiment scheduler population class. Now, what is important is this pipeline ID. To publish this from SDK, you have to use the pipeline ID that you want to publish. So I will take this UID, which is the pipeline ID that I want to publish. Of course, I said I've published before. So let me replace what I have here with this new pipeline that I want to publish. So you can see me replace it here. So when I now, so this pipeline must be part of an experiment. So this is not a new experiment. So I will just, first of all, execute this cell. Then for you to create a schedule, you need to import the schedule recurrence and the schedule class. And both of them are coming from the pipeline.core.schedule. So you have to import this class for you to be able to do what we have done in the machine learning studio. So we execute this. Now, we want to create a time-based schedule. Understand that what I have done before is actually a time-based. The only one I did in the studio is a time-based schedule. And we have said that you can select intervals of minutes, hours, days, week, or month. So something can run every X number of minutes, X number of hours, X number of days or months, just as we have shown in the studio. So this is the one I have told you before. So for me to change this, for me to reproduce what I have done in the studio, I will be able to change this to, instead of minute, I will use week. And then interval, you know that I cannot use 15. If I leave it at 15, it means 50 every 15 weeks. So I will now reduce it to 1, meaning every 1 week. Now, your description is you can write scheduling based on time. So which pipeline are you scheduling? The one with the pipeline ID that we have specified in this cell. So you provide that variable, and under which experiment will it run? You know that we have stated an experiment name. I've also created this schedulers experiment within the machine learning studio. So after you must have done that, we can now execute this cell. So it has created this schedule, pipeline job scheduler, this has been created. We will need to probably confirm it from the machine learning studio. So how do I do that? I go back to this tab, another tab, and maybe when I click on my pipelines, so we can see it has already run anyway. It has run, and then it will wait for every 1 week. It will now wait for next week to run again if I leave it. So this is the scheduler that we have created. So it will run and provide another experiment name on this pipeline. So let's go back. Now, what we have done here is to do scheduling based on time. Another way is you don't say that a pipeline will run every X number of times. You say that the pipeline should run only when new data is provided, only when a particular file, only when there is a change in the input data or the training data. So that is only when the pipeline will be triggered. This is very important because let's say a recommendation system that utilizes how people come to a particular shop or come to an online shop, you want to use the data that you have provided. If you're gathering this data and providing it in irregular time, you are not sure if it is every day or every week or every month, then you should not use time-based. You should use change-based, which means is whenever I provide new data, that is when I want my machine learning model or my data cleaning pipeline or whatever to actually run. So that is what we call the change-based schedule. Now, for you to be able to do this, you have to work with the data store. The data we use for machine learning training are actually created as data sets, which are part of a data store. So these are peculiar features of Azure machine learning, actually. The concept of data store, data sets, storage containers are related to Azure machine learning. And when the time arises, we shall talk about this. So for you to do that, you have to import the data store and then refer to the actual data store name that you have. You also need to provide the input data destination. So this is the file that you're saying, whenever this file changes, I now want this pipeline to be triggered. So we are saying the input, so we create this. So WS is for the workspace. You have to have workspace in Azure Machine Learning before you can actually do anything. And then you need to put the name of the schedule and description. So we said based on input file change. So this is not just based on time, it is based on input file change. And as usual, you have to provide a pipeline ID. You have to provide the experiment name, and you have to provide the data store, and you have to provide the data path parameter name. So, which means this is the data that you're saying, whenever this data input changes, run this pipeline under this experiment. That is the definition of this type of scheduling, okay? So when we run this, so we have now done the change-based scheduling. So if you provide your file, whenever you change this file, which is provided for training this machine learning model, that is the only time that that pipeline will rerun. Okay. Now, I want to summarize what we have done again. Um, in the machine learning studio, we only created a time-based schedule, which means running a pipeline after a given interval. With this machine learning code, we have also shown you how to also repeat what we have done in the studio using code. And in addition, we have told you that you, instead of creating time-based scheduling, that you can actually make a pipeline to only run when the file input changes. And that is called change-based scheduling. So having said that, for each of these, you have to provide the name of the pipeline. And also for you to do this in the SDK, you will have to also make sure that you have published the pipeline that you want to be repeated. So with this, you will understand that this can reduce your work as a data scientist, as well as make your client to have the confidence that they can actually be benefiting from the machine learning models that you have trained and deployed for them without always having to call the data scientist to come and input data to come and retrain the model. So as a data scientist, when you deliver a project, you can actually automate it with these schedulers in such a way that you become engaged only when a human intervention is required to correct a problem in the deployed model. Now, because this is a tutorial, it is advisable that any time you create a resources in Microsoft Azure that you have to wind down, you have to delete them if you don't need them. So I have provided an example here on how to delete these pipelines. Understand that your pipelines, that when they run, they use computing resources. They use data, they generate data, and this is costing you. This will cost money. So if you're not using any resource in Azure, then you have to delete them. So what we did here is to write a function that gets the ID of the scheduler and then uses it to delete it. So this is what the general function here, to disable that schedule. So that is what we are trying to do. This is not necessary if you have actually done this for a client and you want it to continue running. I'm only doing this because I don't want it to continue running and be charging me within my Azure workspace. So for you to see the list of schedules and the IDs, you run this code by calling on schedule.lists within your workspace. So this says, give me all the schedules that are within the workspace WS. So when I click on it, you can see there are a lot of them that we have now created. So I will just share example of one. So for me to remove any of this schedule, I will copy this ID. Put here. So and call the function. So understand that this is the function we have written up there. So when I provide a workspace, so the summary of this is whenever I provide the schedule ID that belongs to a workspace and call the function, I should be able to delete that schedule ID. So it will not be repeating. If I go back and rerun this listing, I'm expecting that the ones I've deleted should be gone. Yeah. So we can see that they are reducing. So if you want to delete more, you simply copy the ID and replace it with this. So you know that you can do this iteratively by using a loop. However, I decided to do it this way just to show us exactly how the deletion of scheduled pipelines work. So when I execute this, it should delete that. And when I go back to list again the schedules and IDs, you can see they are all gone. So nothing shows again. So that is the end of this workshop. Is the summary is that as a data scientist or a machine learning engineer, you want to develop solutions or configure solutions that make work easy for you as well as for the client. The scheduler is one of the ways to automate any pipeline and make sure that they repeat either when a given amount of data is provided or after a given length of time. So with this, I hope that you have learned something today on scheduling and how you can use it to your advantage in doing your machine learning work. Thank you for listening, and you expected to subscribe for subsequent issue-based, production-based, practical kind of issues in machine learning, which you can encounter in workplace or in your interviews that will make you to be successful in getting data scientist or machine learning job. Thank you for coming to my channel. Thank you.